I like when Worcester reaches national news. But when it's for something like 3 people die in Worcestershire Hospital, it's not something to be proud of.
Is that because of lack of beds?
Including a man who had a cardiac arrest and was waiting 35 hours on a trolley in the corridor.
35 hours.
On a trolley in the corridor.
Oh my god.
And they got sent home in a taxi.
It's just so incredible the way that the NHS is just sort of continually gets in these situations, and it's just got even worse this year because the government is just completely unwilling to do anything about it.
Hmm.
So overcrowding's a huge problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
I mean, when it gets to the point that doctors have to make choices between who looks more ill than the other person.
yeah.
Hmm. I think the first thing that we need to say, and we need to be clear that the NHS is in a crisis,
Yeah.
because that seems rather obvious when you look at people in corridors for hours. But the Tories at the moment are not admitting that anything's wrong,
Yeah.
and they're just carrying on. And in my view, that makes them, one, dangerous, and two, unfit for office.
Yeah.
If the NHS was a person, it would literally be plugged into a machine. But the Tories are there going, it's fine, everything's fine. And it's just not.
I think that's the thing. I think eventually, whether they like it or not, the government is going to have to do something about it because there's so much evidence that things are not right, and as much as the Tories don't generally care about a lot, they are going to have to bend to public opinion at some point. I think eventually they're going to get forced into doing something and trying to put a sticking plaster over it and things. Headlines like the one in the Mirror today, with the picture of the baby, just terrible. They're terrible for the government. I think short term, you have to put money in there to get extra staff and to sort this crisis out. But I think if we turn to sort of the medium to long term of the NHS itself, funding is a problem, has been a problem for years now. How do you guys think that we should go forward with the NHS as a whole?
Well, I think certainly looking at, you might have noticed I sound not very English. So I come from a funny part. I come from a funny part of England called Wales, and we are thankfully still Labour's still in power with us, so we've not got the same Tory NHS problems. But what we have got is the Tories cutting our budget by 10% in Westminster. So we have also got huge budget cuts because of the Tories.
Right.
But what Wales is doing is interesting. We're investing in social care as well as the NHS. So what you'll find with the Tories is publicly they won't cut money for the NHS.
Yes.
But what they'll do is they'll cut all the services around the NHS. And when you cut social services, what happens is people rely on the NHS more. And that's what creates the overcrowding. It's not necessarily cutting the NHS, but it's cutting all of the systems that help people before they need to rely on the NHS.
I think that's spot on, because I think that the big problem we've had over the past 5 years is that the government have said, oh no, NHS budgets have been fine. They've been marginally increasing in real terms, slightly. But social care budgets have been cut massively.
Yes.
And that has such a knock-on effect with people having to go to the NHS for help rather than being able to get care. Like, look at patients that can't get released from hospital, and then they're stuck in hospital, unable to be discharged, even though they're not healthy, they're recovered, but because there's no social care, they can't be. And I think that it is important that going forwards, the idea of having health and social care linked together into one organisation, which I think is the Lib Dem policy, is a good idea, because I think we have to look at it as a sort of a whole rather than saying you can separate it out and get rid and decline one's budgets without impacting the other.
Yeah, and for every penny you cut from the social cares budget, you need that money in extra to be paid to the NHS, because you are weakening care. And it's quite a subtle way to do it, because everybody would know if you cut money from the NHS. But not many people know how badly the Tories have systematically destroyed our social care.
Yeah.
So it's quite a subtle and sly way to do it.
Yeah.
But we are seeing the effects now.
Yeah, I don't think it's surprising the way it's gone. I do think in terms of overall the system needs first and foremost more money. I mean, the NHS, the amount that even people say, oh, you've got to give it an extra few billion. Like, it needs an extra £20 billion over a long period of time to invest in more infrastructure, and so on. And I think that, I would say if I was going to try and fund the NHS, I would probably be looking, if you're setting yourself the goal that you shouldn't be increasing the deficit, the way I'd find the money is I would ask the wealthy pensioners to forego their state pensions. The upper 40% of pensioners, considering that pensioners are the group that I don't want to say places the most burden on the NHS, because they are often iller. The best way to fund it is to ask the very rich pensioners to not have state pensions and plough that money back into the NHS, which they would then benefit from because they would use the NHS and get better services.
When you say us,
well, I'd cut
mean
it.
Voluntary?
No, I mean to test a state pension.
Right. Okay. And then and then the sole purpose of that money you would like to see reinvested.
If you consider the amount we spend on the state pension, which is £108 billion a year in 2015, even if you say, all right, 20-30% of those pensioners need the money, which they probably do, I don't dispute that, that still leaves tens of billions of pounds, which goes to pensioners who potentially don't need the money. They'd be okay without it, and they can be better benefited, and other pensioners can be benefited by it by putting it into the NHS and social care. You pull it together and it'll make a bigger impact.
And you can also raise taxes.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Norman Lamb's been saying and others, that an extra 1% on income tax and national insurance, that's going to raise you 10 billion or so. That's money that can be very quickly got into the health service to correct the problems.
But it's not just about a lack of money for the NHS, it's also mismanagement of the money. With the government might not be cutting the NHS itself, but what it's doing is it's spending an awful lot of money on top-down reorganisation.
Yeah.
Which achieves nothing.
Like infamous phrase,
and costs
no more top-down reorganisations, and then launch the largest top-down reorganisation in the history of the entire health service.
Yeah. And it's incredibly expensive as well.
Yeah.
If you ask me, I'm still waiting for that $350 million, £350 million for the NHS.
Well, at this point, dollars is probably more.